Hi, I'm Carmen Alana Tibbets, and today in the studio I am joined by 4 naked hummingbird figures. And these guys all need new clothes, and I'm going to make suits for them using just about all of the techniques that you'll see in my art dolls. And I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to talk about how I make garments for my dolls. So in this series of videos, I'm going to cover all of the basic techniques. In this particular video, I'm going to talk about how I make a basic garment and how to draft a pattern. So let's get started. I'll begin by taking a look at a completed garment on a doll. This is a woodpecker, and this particular woodpecker has kind of a mottled speckled striped chest and a little bit of yellow around the neck. And so I decided to use this sort of fancy houndstooth fabric and then line the jacket with the yellow silk. And so when you're looking at one of the garments on my dolls, the inside is finished as well as the outside. And one of the reasons I came up with my particular technique is so that I wouldn't have to deal with hems or anything messy around the edges of the garment. And so if you had to hem something like this, when you turned it back, you would see the underside of that hem. So what I do is I make all of the garment pieces in one piece, complete them, and then sew them together. And so let me explain what that means by taking a look at another little garment. This is a cape, and it's sort of a nubby silk on the outside, and it's lined with a lightweight linen. So in this case, I actually have very big garment pieces, and they were sewn with the two fabrics right sides together, and then sewn all together as one piece, then cut out, then turned right side out, and then the sections were joined together by stitching at the seam lines along here. And so on the inside you can see those seam lines because I'm doing more close hand stitching on the outside. And in this case I chose to acknowledge those seam lines by putting little beads along. And you can see this is the center back seam here. This is a little pleat that I put in. It's stitched in place with bead. And then this is the side and shoulder seam here. So I put my garments together differently than most people do, but the benefit is that it leads to a nice neat look on the outside, that hemline all around the garment, and a nice clean finish on the inside. It also has the benefit of, if you're doing any embroidery or beadwork, all of that stitching is hidden on the inside of the garment. And so we'll talk about those techniques in another video. So the first thing I want to do is talk about how to make a basic pattern. So this is one of our little hummingbird guys that we had at the beginning, and this is one of the main body types that I use in my dolls. This is a smaller body, and my bodies are pretty basic. Your bodies are probably kind of the same. So I have jointed arms and hips, and this is the bottom of the head joint here, and I cover all of those things in other videos. And what I'm going to talk about here is making a basic sleeveless jacket. So most of the time you want something that opens down the front, and so what we're going to do is start with making the front. Making the back of the pattern is the same sort of thing, but you want to just get a piece of scrap fabric. I'm using muslin here. You can use whatever you want as long as it's lightweight and not very stretchy. You can use something with small stripes or a very faint pattern if it's not going to interfere with the marking that you have to do. So drafting a pattern for a doll is pretty much the same as drafting a pattern for a human. So if you had a dress form for a real live human, you would be marking the center front. And so here I'm just going to sort of put this edge along where I think the center front is going to be. And then I'm going to have extra muslin going up that's going to cover what is the equivalent of the shoulder seam, and so you actually can see a little bit of the seam here. So you want to make sure that the muslin covers that and then the entire neckline. We're not going to worry about adding collars or sleeves or ruffles or anything like that in this video. I'll talk about that in a separate video because I do that differently than most people, of course. So what I'm going to do is pin this so that it's on the torso of the doll smoothly. You don't want to stretch this fabric, but you want everything to be kind of smooth. And so what I'm doing here is I'm kind of tucking this fabric down into the crease where the arm is. And so then I'm going to turn the arm a little bit here. And in this case, I actually kind of lined this up fairly well. And then you want to think about what's going to happen on the sides. Now on my dolls, I leave the sides of the jackets open, and we'll talk about that when it comes to the construction video. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and pin this on here, and this is where the pins are, is actually kind of where the side seam would be. So now at this point, you just want to mark with a marker, and be careful you don't mark your doll. So then the tricky part is getting up into where the arm would be, the arm size, what it's called. And so you have to kind of clip the muslin a little bit to tuck it in there. Don't snip away at your doll, that would be kind of bad. And if it looks like it fits, well, that's pretty good. And then you kind of figure out what kind of neckline you want to do. We'll just say we're going to go something like this, and then you want to go to where it meets the side seam. So, you know, I guess it's not really showing up too well in the video, but let's switch over to one that I had done before. And so I've taken this off of the little hummingbird guy. So what you want to do is kind of true up those lines as best you can. And it's kind of surprising, you wouldn't think so, but even on a little doll like this, it looks a lot like a human jacket pattern. So we have a neckline, shoulder seam, here's the arm side, and then we have the side seam here, and then this is the center front. And so you can mark that if you want to with the pen. And so then what I do is I would cut this out, still kind of sketchy up here, and then I use my patterns. I have one or two basic patterns. Cut this out and then trace it onto cardboard, and I would true up the lines there. And this is just cereal box cardboard. And so I have some examples of my patterns here, and I use kind of a basic back and a basic front. And one thing you do want to do once you've got your pattern here is you actually want to make the shoulder area higher. So these are going to be these lines, the arm side, the neckline, the center front, and the side seam are all going to be as they are finished, and you're not going to add any seam allowances here, but you do add an extra ½ an inch up at the shoulder seam. So you're going to do the same thing for the back and the front. For the back, what you would do is you would just lay the muslin along the center back, and then you fold it in half. And so when you have your completed pattern, here's my back, this would sit on the fold line, or what I do is I just flip it back and forth, and I'm going to talk about that when we talk about construction. So making a pattern is pretty straightforward. It's just the same as doing it for a human. You're going to make your fronts, you just have to do one front, and then you're going to make your back, and you worry about the sleeves, any collars, ruffles, or anything after the fact. You're going to complete this portion of the jacket before you even think about any of those other things. Okay? So go ahead, go home, try making a pattern. When we come back for the next video, we're going to sew these things together, and we're going to make our basic sleeveless jacket.